The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the dusty general store, and Willa Summers pressed her handkerchief against her swollen left eye, praying the purple bruise would somehow disappear before she had to face the stranger who would become her husband. It was August 1882, and Oklahoma City sprawled before her like a promise she desperately hoped wouldn't break. Its wooden buildings baking under the relentless prairie sun while cattle lowed in distant pens, and the smell of horses and leather filled the air. She gathered her single-worn carpetbag, the only possession she had managed to grab when she fled Philadelphia 3 weeks ago, and stepped down onto the packed earth with trembling legs. The driver had pointed out the Irwin Ranch on the way into town, a sprawling property just 2 miles north where cattle grazed on brown grass, and a sturdy homestead stood against the endless Oklahoma sky. Willa had seen it from the coach window and felt her heart squeeze with equal parts hope and terror. This was supposed to be her fresh start, her escape from Victor, from the nightmare her life had become after her father died and left her in the care of her brutal cousin. But now, standing in the harsh afternoon light with her face marked by Victor's final rage, she wondered if any man would truly want her, damaged as she was. "Miss Summers." A deep voice cut through her spiraling thoughts, and Willa turned to find herself facing a man who could only be Colton Irwin. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his worn cotton shirt and sun-bronzed skin that spoke of years working under the Oklahoma sky. His dark hair needed a trim, curling slightly at his collar, and his jaw was strong and clean-shaven. But it was his eyes that caught her, gray as storm clouds and currently fixed on her face with an intensity that made her want to hide. She watched those gray eyes travel from her carefully styled brown hair to her face, and she saw the exact moment he noticed the bruise. His entire body went rigid, his jaw clenching so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. His hands, which had been relaxed at his sides, curled into fists. "Did he follow you here?" The question came out low and dangerous, and Willa felt something shift in her chest. Not fear, which is what she expected from male anger, but something else entirely, something that felt almost like safety. "I don't know," she whispered, honesty spilling out before she could think better of it. "I tried to be careful. I changed coaches in Kansas City. I gave the ticket agent a false name at first, but Victor is persistent when he wants something. And he wanted me to marry his business partner, a man 3 times my age who promised him a stake in a shipping company." Colton stepped closer, and Willa forced herself not to flinch. He moved slowly, deliberately, as though approaching a spooked horse. When he spoke again, his voice had gentled. "Nobody's going to hurt you here, Miss Summers. I give you my word on that. A man who'd strike a woman isn't a man at all, and if this Victor shows his face in Oklahoma City, he'll find out real quick what we think of his kind." Willa felt tears prick her eyes, the first genuine kindness she had experienced in months threatening to undo her completely. She blinked them back rapidly. "I should tell you that I understand if you don't want to go through with the arrangement. I'm not what you expected, I'm sure. The photograph I sent was taken 2 years ago, and I didn't mention my circumstances. And now I've brought trouble to your door before we've even said our vows." Something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of Colton's mouth, though his eyes remained serious. "The photograph showed a pretty girl with sad eyes, and standing here in front of me is a beautiful woman with brave eyes, bruise or no bruise. As for trouble, I've dealt with rustlers, rattlesnakes, and a drought that nearly broke me 3 years back. I reckon I can handle one mean-spirited man from Philadelphia if it comes to that." He picked up her carpetbag as though it weighed nothing, then offered her his free arm. "Come on, let's get you out to the ranch. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen." She'll fix you up with something cool to drink and a room where you can rest. We don't have to talk about marriage or anything else until you're ready. You're safe now, Willa. That's what matters." Willa placed her hand on his arm, feeling the solid strength of him through the cotton fabric, and let him lead her to where a sturdy wagon waited. The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, but she barely noticed the heat. She was too focused on the man beside her, this stranger who had looked at her damaged face and immediately asked if her abuser had followed her, who had promised her safety before anything else. The ride to the ranch took 20 minutes, and Colton filled the silence with easy talk about the property, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the cattle operation he had built from nothing over the past 6 years. "I came out here when I was 18, he explained, guiding the horses along the rutted road. "My father died back in Missouri, and my mother followed him 6 months later. Grief took her. I had nothing keeping me there, so I bought a ticket west and hired on as a ranch hand for old Henry Peterson. He taught me the cattle business, and when he passed 3 years ago, he left me a small stake. I used it to buy this land and started building." Willa watched his profile as he talked, noting the way his eyes scanned the horizon constantly, alert for any sign of trouble or anything out of place. "Why did you place an advertisement for a bride?" she asked softly. "A man like you with land and prospects, surely there are women in town who would be interested." Colton was quiet for a moment, and Willa worried she had overstepped. Then he sighed. "There aren't many unmarried women in Oklahoma City, and the few there are have known me since I was a green kid who didn't know a longhorn from a dairy cow. They see me as a friend, nothing more. And I suppose I wanted someone who chose to be here, who made the decision deliberately instead of just settling because I was available. Does that make sense?" It made perfect sense to Willa, who had chosen to answer his advertisement out of dozens because his letter had been honest and straightforward, lacking the flowery promises or barely concealed desperation of the others. He had written about his land and his work, about wanting a partner to build a life with, about hoping to find someone who wouldn't mind the isolation and hard work of ranch life. He hadn't promised her riches or luxury, just a home and respect, and the chance to be part of something lasting. The ranch house came into view, a 2-story structure of solid timber with a wide front porch and real glass windows that caught the afternoon light. A barn stood behind it, freshly painted red, and she could see cattle grazing in fenced pastures that stretched toward the horizon. It was more than she had dared to hope for, this evidence of stability and care. A small woman with gray-streaked black hair emerged from the house as they pulled up, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face was weathered but kind, with sharp dark eyes that missed nothing. "This is Mrs. Chen," Colton said, hopping down and coming around to help Willa from the wagon. "She's been keeping house for me these past 2 years, and she's the best cook in the territory. Mrs. Chen, this is Miss Willa Summers." Mrs. Chen's eyes went immediately to Willa's bruised face and her expression hardened. She said something sharp in Chinese, then switched to English. "That man who did this, he is far away, Philadelphia," Willa answered. "At least I hope he is." "You hope?" Mrs. Chen looked at Colton. "She hopes." "This is not good enough. You will watch for trouble, yes." "Already planning on it," Colton assured her. He carried Willa's bag into the house and both women followed. The interior was simple but well-maintained, with sturdy furniture and clean floors and curtains at the windows. It smelled like bread baking and the lavender someone had hung in bunches from the rafters. Mrs. Chen bustled Willa upstairs to a bedroom that faced east, where the morning sun would stream through the windows. "You rest now," she ordered. "I bring you water for washing and something to eat. That I needs cold cloth. I fix." Alone in the room, Willa sank onto the bed and finally let herself cry. Great shaking sobs that she muffled in the pillow, releasing 3 weeks of terror and uncertainty and desperate hope. She cried for her father, dead 2 years now from a sudden heart attack that had left her alone in the world. She cried for her lost home in Philadelphia, the comfortable house that had been sold to pay her father's debts, leaving her dependent on her cousin Victor's dubious mercy. And she cried for the girl she had been before Victor's temper and fists had taught her what it meant to be powerless. When the tears finally subsided, she washed her face carefully with the water Mrs. Chen had brought, avoiding the tender bruise around her eye. The older woman had also left a tray with cold chicken, fresh bread and sliced tomatoes, along with a glass of cool buttermilk from the springhouse. Willa ate slowly, surprised by her appetite, and was just finishing when a soft knock came at the door. "Come in," she called, expecting Mrs. Chen. Instead, Colton entered, his hat in his hands and his expression uncertain in a way that made him seem younger than his 24 years. "I wanted to talk to you about the arrangements," he said, staying near the door as though afraid of spooking her. "I know we agreed by letter to marry right away, but given the circumstances, I think you should take some time to settle in. Get to know the place, get to know me, make sure this is really what you want." Willa set down her glass and studied him. In the golden light filtering through the window, she could see the fine lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, the small scar on his chin, the calluses on his strong hands. He looked solid and real and trustworthy in a way Victor had never been. "And if I decide I don't want to marry you," she asked quietly, "what then? I used the last of my money for the train tickets. I have nowhere else to go." Colton met her eyes steadily. "Then you stay anyway until you figure out what you do want. Mrs. Chen could use help around the house if you want to earn your keep, or if you'd rather move into town. I'll stake you to a room at the boarding house until you can find work. I'm not going to turn you out, Willa. You came here on good faith, answering my advertisement honestly. The fact that you're running from a bad situation doesn't change that." The knot that had been tight in Willa's chest since she fled Philadelphia loosened slightly. "You're a good man, Colton Irwin." "I try to be," he said simply. "Now, I've got to go check on the cattle in the south pasture before dark, but I'll be back for supper. Mrs. Chen makes a roast on Saturdays that'll make you want to weep with happiness. You rest, and we'll talk more tomorrow." After he left, Willa lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind churning. She had been prepared to marry Colton immediately upon arrival, to bind herself legally to a stranger because anything was better than staying within Victor's reach. But Colton was offering her something she hadn't expected: choice, the freedom to decide her own future without desperation driving every decision. The question was, what did she truly want over the next week? Willa fell into the rhythm of ranch life. She rose early to help Mrs. Chen with breakfast, learning to cook for a working man who needed substantial meals to fuel long days in the saddle. She discovered that Colton employed 3 ranch hands, Mexican brothers named Diego, Carlos, and Miguel Rodriguez, who lived in the bunkhouse, and treated her with unfailing courtesy. They taught her Spanish words while she helped Mrs. Chen pack their lunch pails, and they answered her endless questions about cattle and horses and life on the Oklahoma prairie. Colton himself was gone most of each day, working alongside his men to move cattle to fresh grazing, repair fences, and deal with the 100 small crises that arose on a working ranch. But he came back to the house for the midday meal, and in those hours, Willa began to know him. She learned that he had a quiet sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable, that he read books in the evening by lamplight, and had a small collection of volumes ranging from agricultural journals to Shakespeare. She learned that he had built most of the furniture in the house with his own hands during the long winter months when outside work was impossible. And she learned that he was unfailingly patient with her skittishness, never moving too quickly or raising his voice, always asking permission before entering a room where she was working. He treated her like something precious and slightly fragile, and while part of her chafed at the caution, another part of her was grateful for it. On the 8th day after her arrival, Willa was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she heard the sound of an approaching horse ridden hard. She looked up to see Colton galloping in from the southern pasture, and her heart kicked into a faster rhythm. Something was wrong. He swung down from his horse before it had fully stopped and strode directly to her. "Willa, I need you to answer me honestly. This cousin of yours, Victor, what's his full name?" Cold dread washed through her. "Victor Chambers." "Why, Colton, what's happened?" "Diego rode into town this morning for supplies and heard a man at the hotel asking questions about a woman matching your description. Said he was looking for his cousin who had run away from home in Philadelphia, that she was confused and needed family to take care of her." Colton's jaw was tight with barely suppressed anger. The man gave his name as Victor Chambers and said he had reason to believe his poor confused cousin had come to Oklahoma City because she had some fool notion about marrying a rancher she'd never met. Willa's legs went weak and she gripped the laundry basket for support. "He found me." "Oh God, he actually followed me all this way." Colton's hands came up to grip her shoulders, gentle but firm, grounding her when panic threatened to pull her under. "Listen to me. He doesn't know which rancher or exactly where you are yet. Nobody in town will tell him anything, not after Diego spread the word about that bruise on your face when you arrived. But Willa, we need to make a decision. If you're my wife, legally bound to me, then he has no claim on you, none at all. But if you're just a woman staying at my ranch, then he could potentially cause trouble, claim you're mentally unwell, or some other nonsense." Willa looked up into his gray eyes and saw steely determination there, along with something warmer that made her breath catch. "Are you asking me to marry you, Colton?" "I'm asking if you want to marry me," he corrected. "Not because you're desperate or afraid, but because you think we might be able to build something good together. I know it's only been a week, but I feel like I've come to know you, Willa. I like the way you laugh at Mrs. Chen's stories. I like how you're not afraid to ask questions or try new things. I like finding you on the porch in the evening reading one of my books. And I think, maybe, you might have started to like some things about me too." She had. Against all odds and her every intention to keep her heart carefully guarded, she had started to care for this quiet, steady man with kind eyes and gentle hands. She liked the way he treated his horses and his employees with equal respect. She liked how he never made her feel stupid for not knowing things about ranch life. She liked the sound of his voice in the evening when he read aloud from whatever book he was working through, and the way he always made sure she had the comfortable chair by the lamp. "Victor will fight it," she warned. "He'll claim you coerced me or that I'm not of sound mind. He doesn't give up easily when he wants something." "Then he can try," Colton said flatly. "But he'll be fighting the law, and out here a man's wife is his wife. End of discussion. Plus, Sheriff Donovan is a friend of mine, and he takes a dim view of men who hit women. He'll back us up." Willa took a deep breath and made her choice, the first truly free choice she had made in 2 years. "Yes, yes, I want to marry you, Colton." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, transforming his normally serious expression into something that made her heart skip. "Then let's ride into town right now and find the preacher. We'll do this properly, with witnesses and everything legal and recorded." By the time your cousin finds this ranch, you'll be Mrs. Irwin, and he can go straight back to Philadelphia with nothing to show for his trouble but wasted train fare. They were married 2 hours later in the small white church on the east side of Oklahoma City, with Mrs. Chen and the Rodriguez brothers as witnesses and Sheriff Donovan standing at the back with his arms crossed and a satisfied expression on his weathered face. The preacher, a kindly man named Reverend Walsh, kept the ceremony short and sweet, perhaps sensing the urgency underlying the occasion. When Colton slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, a ring that had belonged to his mother, Willa felt tears slip down her cheeks. Good tears this time, cleansing tears that washed away some of the fear and pain of the past months. And when the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Colton kissed her with such gentle reverence that she felt cherished in a way she had never experienced before. They filed the marriage certificate with the county clerk immediately afterward, making sure everything was official and documented. Then Colton took her to the general store and insisted on buying her 3 new dresses, a warm coat for the coming winter, and a pair of sturdy boots suitable for ranch work. "You're my wife now," he said when she protested the expense. "Let me take care of you properly." The sun was setting when they finally headed back to the ranch, the wagon loaded with supplies and Willa's new belongings. She sat close to Colton on the bench seat, not quite touching but near enough to feel his warmth, and watched the prairie grass turn gold in the fading light. "Are you scared?" Colton asked softly. "About tonight, I mean, about the marriage being real." Willa considered the question honestly. "A little," she admitted, "but not of you. I'm scared of my own expectations, I suppose, scared of disappointing you." Colton guided the horses with one hand and reached over to take hers with the other. "Willa, I don't expect anything from you that you're not ready to give. We'll take things as slow as you need. This marriage is legal now whether we share a bed tonight or a year from now. The only thing I care about is that you feel safe and comfortable in your own home." That night, Colton moved his things into the spare room without fanfare, giving Willa the larger bedroom and the privacy to process everything that had happened. She lay awake for a long time, turning the gold ring on her finger and marveling at how her life had transformed in the space of a single day. She had woken up as a fugitive hiding at a stranger's ranch, and she was going to sleep as a married woman with legal protection and a home of her own. The next morning, Victor arrived. Willa was in the kitchen helping Mrs. Chen preserve tomatoes when they heard the sound of a buggy approaching the house. She looked out the window and felt her blood turn to ice. She would recognize that proud bearing anywhere, that expensive suit and perfectly groomed mustache that Victor maintained with such vanity. "That's him," she whispered, and Mrs. Chen immediately dried her hands and went to find Colton. He appeared within moments, coming in from the barn with Diego and Carlos flanking him. His expression was calm, but Willa could see the steel in his eyes. "Stay inside," he told her quietly. "Let me handle this." She wanted to obey, wanted to hide like a coward and let Colton fight her battles, but something in her rebelled against it. She had run from Victor once. She wouldn't run again. "No," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "I need to face him. I need him to see that I'm not afraid anymore." Colton studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but I'll be right beside you, and so will Diego and Carlos. He won't lay a finger on you, Willa, I swear it." They walked out onto the porch together, a united front, and Victor climbed down from his rented buggy with a smile that didn't reach his cold blue eyes. He was handsome in a polished way that Willa had once found appealing, before she learned that his attractive exterior hid a cruel and controlling nature. "Willa, darling," he called out, his voice dripping with false concern. "Thank God I finally found you. I've been so worried." When you disappeared like that, I feared the worst. Come now, let's go back to the hotel and talk about this rationally. You've caused quite enough trouble with this little adventure." "I'm not going anywhere with you, Victor," Willa said, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "And this isn't an adventure. This is my life, and I'm finally living it the way I choose." Victor's smile hardened. "Don't be ridiculous. You're confused, probably suffering from some kind of nervous condition. It runs in families, you know. Your father had episodes toward the end. Now come along before you embarrass yourself further." "My father didn't have episodes," Willa snapped, anger rising to burn away the last of her fear. "He had a heart condition that killed him, and you know it. Don't you dare use his memory to manipulate me." "Watch your tone," Victor said, his voice dropping to the cold register Willa remembered all too well. "You're coming with me one way or another. You're my responsibility, and I won't have it said that I abandoned family." Colton stepped forward, and though he didn't raise his voice, there was something absolutely uncompromising in his tone. "The lady just told you she's not going with you, and for your information, she's not your responsibility anymore. She's my wife. We were married yesterday, legal and proper, with the certificate filed at the county clerk's office. So whatever claim you think you have on her, it's void." Victor's face flushed an ugly red. "Your wife? That's impossible. She can't marry without family permission." "She's not of sound mind to make such a decision." "She's 22 years old," Colton said, his voice dangerously quiet. "She doesn't need anyone's permission. And her mind is perfectly sound, which is more than I can say for any man who'd strike a woman and leave her with a black eye." "How dare you?" Victor sputtered. "I don't know what lies she's told you, but I never laid a hand on her. She fell, that's all. She's always been clumsy." "I didn't fall," Willa said clearly. "You hit me because I refused to marry your business partner. You hit me because I dared to say no to you. And it wasn't the first time, Victor. It was just the first time I had somewhere to run to." For a moment, Victor's mask slipped, and Willa saw naked rage in his eyes. He started toward the porch, and she instinctively stepped back. But Colton moved faster, putting himself between her and Victor, with Diego and Carlos closing ranks on either side. "That's close enough," Colton said, and now his hand rested casually on the pistol at his hip. "You need to leave my property. Now." "This isn't over," Victor said, his voice shaking with fury. "I'll take this to court. I'll prove she's unfit. I'll have this sham marriage annulled." Sheriff Donovan's voice cut across the tension like a knife. "No, you won't." The sheriff had ridden up so quietly that no one had noticed his arrival. He sat on his horse with the casual ease of a man completely comfortable with his authority, his badge catching the morning sunlight. "I've been doing some checking on you, Mr. Chambers. Sent some telegrams to Philadelphia. Seems you've got quite a reputation back east for a quick temper and a heavy hand. 3 different boarding house keepers mentioned how Miss Summers here kept to her room when she was living under your roof, how she always seemed nervous around you." Victor's face had gone pale. "That proves nothing." "Maybe not in a court of law," the sheriff agreed, "but it proves plenty to me. Now you've got 2 choices. You can climb back in that buggy and catch the afternoon train out of Oklahoma City, or I can arrest you for trespassing and harassment and let you spend a few days in our jail while we investigate those allegations of assault. Your choice." The silence stretched out, taut as a bowstring. Then Victor turned on his heel and climbed back into the buggy without another word. But before he drove away, he looked at Willa one last time, and the hatred in his eyes made her shiver despite the warm morning sun. "If you ever regret this," he said coldly, "don't come crying to me for help. You've made your bed, cousin. I hope you can lie in it." They watched until the buggy disappeared down the road in a cloud of dust. Then Willa's knees gave out, and only Colton's quick reflexes kept her from crumpling to the porch floor. He swept her up into his arms and carried her inside, settling her gently onto the sofa in the parlor while Mrs. Chen rushed to bring water. "It's over," Colton said, kneeling beside her and taking her trembling hands in his. "He's gone, Willa. He can't hurt you anymore." "He could come back," she whispered. "At night, when we're not expecting him. He could, he won't," Sheriff Donovan said from the doorway. "I'm going to personally escort him to the train station and make sure he gets on that train. And I'm going to send word to my counterpart in Philadelphia that Victor Chambers isn't welcome back in Oklahoma territory. If he tries to return, he'll be arrested on sight." After the sheriff left, Willa finally let herself collapse into Colton's arms, her face buried against his chest as the reality of her freedom sank in. He held her while she cried, one hand stroking her hair while he murmured reassurances, and she felt safe in a way she hadn't felt since her father died. That night, after supper, Colton took her hand and led her out to the porch to watch the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The air had cooled with sunset, carrying the scent of grass and cattle and the endless prairie stretching away in all directions. "I want you to know something," Colton said quietly, his shoulder pressed against hers as they sat on the porch swing he had built last spring. "I know we got married for practical reasons, to keep you safe from Victor. And I meant what I said about not expecting anything from you. But Willa, I need you to know that I'm glad you came here. I'm glad you answered my advertisement. These past 10 days, having you here, it's made this house feel like a home instead of just a place I sleep." Willa turned to look at him, this good man who had given her safety and respect and asked for nothing in return. In the soft twilight, she could see the honest emotion in his gray eyes, the vulnerability of someone risking his heart. "I'm glad I came too," she said softly. "When I first decided to answer your letter, I was just looking for an escape. But now, being here with you, I think maybe I found something more, something I didn't even know I was looking for." "What's that?" Colton asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "A chance to be myself," Willa said. "Not someone's dependent or someone's burden or someone's punching bag. Just myself, making my own choices and living my own life. You gave me that, Colton. Even before we married, you gave me that." He reached up slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and cupped her cheek with his calloused palm. "You're remarkable, Willa Irwin, brave and strong and beautiful. I hope you know that." When he kissed her this time, it was different from the chaste kiss they had shared at their wedding. This kiss held promise and possibility, the spark of something real growing between them. Willa leaned into it, her hand coming up to rest over his heart, feeling its steady rhythm beneath her palm. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Willa threw herself into learning everything about ranch life, riding out with Colton to check on the cattle, learning to rope and brand, discovering a love for the wide open spaces that she never could have anticipated back in Philadelphia. She was good with the horses, Colton discovered, patient and gentle in a way that won over even the most skittish animals. And slowly, carefully, they built their marriage into something real. Colton courted her properly, bringing her wildflowers from the prairie, and taking her on picnics to a pretty spot by the creek that ran through the southern edge of his property. He taught her to shoot, patient through all her fumbling attempts until she could hit a tin can at 20 paces. She read to him in the evenings while he mended tack or went over the ranch accounts, and they talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories and dreams. The first time Willa invited him back to the main bedroom, 6 weeks after their hasty wedding, it was her choice freely made. And Colton loved her with the same gentleness and patience he had shown from the beginning, making sure every moment was about her comfort and pleasure. Afterward, wrapped in his arms with her head on his chest, Willa felt something inside her heal, a wound she hadn't even fully acknowledged finally beginning to close. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness, the first time she had said those words to anyone since her father died. Colton's arms tightened around her. "I love you too, Willa, more than I have words for." The first winter was hard, as winters in Oklahoma Territory tended to be, with bitter winds sweeping across the prairie and snow piling up in drifts against the barn. But the house was snug and well built, and Willa discovered a contentment in the long evenings by the fire, teaching Colton to play the card games her father had taught her, while Mrs. Chen knitted in the corner and the wind howled outside. She also discovered she was pregnant in December, a realization that filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She told Colton one evening after supper, her hands shaking as she placed them over her still flat belly. His reaction erased all her fears. His face lit up like a child's on Christmas morning, and he picked her up and spun her around the kitchen, laughing with pure delight. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We're going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Willa asked, needing to hear it. "Happy." Colton set her down carefully as though she might break and cupped her face in his hands. "Willa, I'm beyond happy. I'm blessed. A year ago I was alone, eating Mrs. Chen's cooking but with nobody to share my life with. And now I have you and soon we'll have a child. How could I be anything but happy?" Their son was born in late July 1883, during a thunderstorm that rolled across the prairie with dramatic timing. Colton paced the hallway outside their bedroom while Mrs. Chen and the doctor from town attended to Willa, and when he finally heard his son's first cry, he burst into the room despite the doctor's protests about propriety. Willa, exhausted and sweat-soaked but radiant, held out her hand to him. "Come meet your son," she said softly. They named him William, after her father, and Colton proved to be a devoted father from the very first moment. He fashioned a cradle with his own hands, carved with intricate designs of horses and cattle, and he would sit beside it for hours in the evening, reading aloud to his infant son, or just watching him sleep with an expression of such tender love that it made Willa's heart ache. The ranch prospered over the next few years. Colton's careful management and hard work paid off, allowing him to expand his herd and hire additional hands. They built a new barn and added a room onto the house for the growing family, because William was joined by a daughter in 1885. A fierce little thing they named Catherine after Colton's mother, and then another son in 1887, named Thomas for no one in particular, except that they both liked the sound of it. Willa grew into her role as a rancher's wife and mother, her hands becoming calloused from work and her skin bronzed from the prairie sun. She could rope a calf, birth a foal, and shoot a rattlesnake with equal competence, and Colton often said she was the best partner he could have asked for in building their life together. On a warm evening in September 1890, 8 years after Willa had stepped off that stagecoach with a black eye and a heart full of fear, she stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. William, now 7, was helping his father with the evening chores, a miniature version of Colton with his serious gray eyes and steady manner. Catherine and Thomas were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Mrs. Chen came out to stand beside her, wiping her hands on her apron. The older woman had become more than an employee over the years. She was family in all the ways that mattered. "You are happy," Mrs. Chen said, not a question but an observation. "I am," Willa agreed, one hand resting unconsciously on the slight swell of her belly where a fourth child grew. "More than I ever thought possible back when I first came here." "That man, Victor, he never came back," Mrs. Chen said. You heard from him. Willa shook her head. Not a word in 8 years. Sheriff Donovan told me a few years ago that Victor married that business partner's daughter himself, some kind of merger arrangement between families. I hope he treats her better than he treated me, but somehow I doubt it. She felt no guilt over that hope, no obligation to the man who had been her blood relative but never her family in any meaningful sense. Her family was here, in this home she had built with Colton, in the children who called her mama and the husband who loved her with steady devotion. Colton and William came up from the barn, and Colton's face broke into a smile when he saw Willa on the porch. After 8 years of marriage, that smile still made her heart skip. He climbed the steps and pulled her into his arms, heedless of the dirt on his clothes, and kissed her soundly while William made exaggerated gagging noises and Catherine giggled from the yard. "What was that for?" Willa asked, laughing against his mouth. "Do I need a reason to kiss my beautiful wife?" Colton countered. Then his expression grew more serious, though his eyes remained warm. "I was just thinking today about how lucky I am, about how that advertisement I placed was the best decision I ever made." "I think I was the lucky one," Willa said softly. "You saved me, Colton. You gave me a life worth living." "No," Colton said firmly, pulling back to look her in the eye. "You saved yourself, Willa. You made the choice to leave to get on that train and come west. You made the choice to stay and build a life here. All I did was give you a safe place to land. Everything else, all the strength and courage and love, that was all you." Willa felt tears prick her eyes, good tears that came easily these days. "We saved each other then," she compromised. "I gave you a partner and a family, and you gave me a home and safety and love. Fair trade, I'd say." "The best trade I ever made," Colton agreed. That night, after the children were tucked into bed and the house had settled into quiet, Willa stood at the bedroom window looking out at the starlit prairie. Colton came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, his chin resting on top of her head. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "About choices," Willa said. "About how one decision, one moment of courage can change everything. When I stepped off that stagecoach with a black eye and a heart full of fear, I never imagined I'd end up here, in this beautiful life we've built together." "When I saw you that day," Colton said, his arms tightening around her, "with that bruise on your face and that scared look in your eyes, my first thought was to protect you. My second thought was that you were the bravest person I'd ever met, to travel all that way alone, running toward an uncertain future rather than staying in a certain hell. I think I started falling in love with you right then, before you even told me your name." Willa turned in his arms to face him. "I was so afraid that day. Afraid you'd send me away, afraid Victor would find me, afraid I'd never be safe again. But you asked me if he had followed me here, and I knew in that moment that you cared about my safety more than your own convenience. That's when I started to hope that maybe this new life could really work." "It worked," Colton said, smiling down at her. "Better than worked. It became everything I never knew I was looking for." The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and family. William grew into a quiet, capable young man who could manage the ranch as well as his father. Catherine developed a gift with horses that had neighbors bringing their most difficult mounts for her to train. Thomas showed an aptitude for numbers and began handling the ranch accounts before he was 15. The fourth child, born in the spring of 1891, was another daughter they named Grace, and she came into the world during a gentle rain that broke a weeks-long drought. Colton said she was well named because everything about her was graceful, from her easy temperament to the way she seemed to float rather than walk once she learned to toddle. In 1895, when Willa was 35 and Colton was 37, They took a rare trip, just the two of them, leaving the children in Mrs. Chen's capable care, and riding out to the spot by the creek where Colton had proposed to her properly, months after their hurried marriage ceremony. It was spring, and the prairie was covered in wildflowers, a riot of color against the green grass. They spread a blanket and ate the lunch Willa had packed, talking easily about everything and nothing the way long married couples do. Then Colton pulled something from his pocket and held it out to her. It was a locket, silver and delicate, hanging from a fine chain. "Open it," he urged. Inside were two tiny photographs, one of her father that she had thought lost years ago, and one of her and Colton on their wedding day, a photo the sheriff had insisted on taking after the ceremony. "How did you get my father's picture?" Willa asked, tears streaming down her face. "I wrote to the boarding house in Philadelphia where you lived with Victor. Years ago," Colton admitted. "The proprietress remembered you, remembered how sweet you were, and how worried she'd been about you. She sent me some things Victor had left in your old room when he moved, things he didn't think were valuable enough to bother with. Your father's picture was among them." Willa traced the outline of her father's beloved face through the glass of the locket. "Thank you," she whispered. "You can't know what this means to me." "I wanted you to have him with you always," Colton said simply. "And I wanted you to have this too, a reminder of the day we started building our life together." Willa fastened the locket around her neck, feeling the weight of it settle against her heart. Then she turned to her husband and kissed him with all the love and gratitude she felt. "I love you, Colton Irwin, more today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "That's beautiful," he said, smiling against her mouth. "Did you make that up?" "I did," she admitted, "but it's true. I fall more in love with you every single day." In 1898, William married a sweet girl from town named Margaret, and they built a house on the eastern edge of the Irwin property, expanding the ranch operation into a true family enterprise. Their first grandchild, a boy named Colton William Irwin, was born in 1899, and Willa discovered that the joy of being a grandmother was entirely different from the joy of being a mother, but no less profound. Catherine, independent and strong-willed, shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to go to veterinary school back east, one of the new schools that had started accepting women. Colton and Willa, remembering how important it was to have choices, supported her dream and helped pay for her education. She returned 3 years later with a degree and opened a practice in Oklahoma City, the first female veterinarian in the territory. Thomas, the numbers genius, became a banker and financier, helping ranchers throughout the territory manage their money and expand their operations. He married late, at 28, to a widow with 2 children of her own, and he loved those children as though they were his blood. Grace, the youngest, surprised no one when she announced her intention to become a teacher. She had always been the one telling stories to her younger cousins, organizing the neighborhood children into impromptu schools in the barn during summer. She taught at the schoolhouse in Oklahoma City for 3 years before marrying a fellow teacher and moving to Tulsa, where they started their own family. In 1905, on a warm evening in August, exactly 23 years after Willa had arrived in Oklahoma City with a black eye and a heart full of hope, she and Colton sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were both in their 40s now, their hair touched with gray and their faces lined by years of sun and wind and laughter. But they held hands like newlyweds, fingers intertwined, and the love between them was as strong as ever. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't placed that advertisement?" Willa asked, watching the sky turn gold and pink. "Sometimes," Colton admitted, "but not as much as I think about how grateful I am that I did. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Willa." You and our children and the life we built together. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Not even for an easier life, Willa teased. One without a wife who showed up with a black eye and a violent cousin on her trail. Colton pulled her close, tucking her against his side the way he had done 1,000 times before. Especially not for an easier life. Easy doesn't make you stronger. Easy doesn't teach you what really matters. That black eye was part of your story, part of what made you who you are, and I love who you are, Willa. Every single part of you, including the scars. Willa thought about the scars, both visible and invisible, that she carried. The bruise around her eye had faded within weeks, but the psychological wounds had taken longer to heal. There were still occasional nightmares where Victor found her, still moments of irrational fear when someone raised their voice unexpectedly. But Colton had been patient through all of it, holding her through the nightmares and reminding her gently that she was safe, that no one would hurt her again. I wonder sometimes what happened to Victor, she admitted. I know I shouldn't care, but I can't help being curious. Do you want to know? Colton asked carefully. I could make inquiries, send some telegrams. Willa thought about it for a long moment, then shook her head. No, whatever happened to him, whether he's happy or miserable or somewhere in between, it doesn't matter anymore. He's part of my past, and I'd rather focus on my present and future. On this life we've built and the family we've raised and all the years still ahead of us. Good, Colton said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, because I have plans for those years ahead. Big plans. Oh. Willa looked up at him, intrigued. What kind of plans? Well, William's been talking about expanding the herd, getting into breeding quarter horses alongside the cattle. I think we should let him, help him get started. And I've been thinking about building a second bunkhouse, hiring more hands so we can really grow the operation. That sounds wonderful, Willa said. But what about us? What are your plans for us, just you and me? Colton smiled, that sunrise smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. I plan to love you every day for the rest of my life. I plan to wake up next to you every morning and be grateful for whatever forces of the universe brought you to me. I plan to grow old with you, watching our grandchildren play in this yard and maybe even great-grandchildren someday. And I plan to never stop telling you how much you mean to me, how you're the most important thing in my world. Willa felt tears slip down her cheeks, happy tears that came so much easier now than the frightened, hurting tears of her younger self. Those are good plans. I think I'd like to be part of them. Forever, Colton said, and it was both a question and a promise. Forever, Willa agreed, sealing it with a kiss as the sun set on another beautiful day in the life they had built together. The years that followed were peaceful and productive. The ranch continued to prosper under the combined management of Colton, Willa, and William. The quarter horses became known throughout Oklahoma Territory for their speed and temperament, with buyers coming from as far away as Texas and Kansas to purchase Irwin stock. Willa became something of a legend in her own right, a woman who could run a ranch as well as any man, and who wasn't afraid to speak her mind in business negotiations. She joined the Oklahoma Territorial Women's Association and advocated for women's suffrage and property rights, using her own story as an example of why women needed legal protections and financial independence. In 1907, when Oklahoma became a state, Willa and Colton attended the celebration in Guthrie, watching as the new state constitution was signed and feeling a swell of pride for the place they had called home for 25 years. The untamed territory they had helped settle was now officially part of the United States, and they had been part of making that happen. Their golden anniversary in 1932 was celebrated with a huge party on the ranch, with children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren filling the house and yard. William gave a toast, speaking about how his parents had shown him what real love looked like, how they had built not just a successful ranch, but a strong family founded on respect and partnership. Catherine spoke about her mother's courage in leaving an abusive situation and her father's decency in giving her a safe place to land. Thomas and Grace added their own tributes, and by the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. That night, after everyone had left or settled into various bedrooms throughout the house, Colton and Willa sat on their porch in the same spot where they had spent countless evenings over the past 50 years. They were old now, both in their 70s, with white hair and creaky joints and all the ailments that came with age. But the love in Colton's eyes when he looked at Willa was exactly the same as it had been when he first saw her step off that stagecoach with a black eye and a brave heart. Did you ever imagine that day when you placed the advertisement that it would lead to all this? Willa asked, gesturing to the house full of family and the prosperous ranch stretching away in all directions. Not in my wildest dreams, Colton admitted. I was just lonely, hoping to find someone to share my life with. I never imagined I'd find my soulmate, my best friend, my partner in everything. I never imagined we'd build something this beautiful together. When I answered your letter, Willa said softly, I was just trying to survive. I was running scared, desperate for any escape from Victor's control. I never imagined I'd find real love, true partnership, a life that would be so full of joy and purpose. You gave me all that, Colton. You gave me everything. We gave it to each other, Colton corrected, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. You brought as much to this marriage as I did, maybe more. Your courage, your strength, your willingness to work hard and learn new things, your devotion to our children, your love. Those aren't things I gave you, Willa. Those are things you brought with you, things that were always part of who you are. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the night prairie, the distant call of an owl and the rustle of wind through grass. Inside the house, they could hear the murmur of voices as their family settled in for the night, the sound of children being shushed and adults laughing quietly over shared memories. You have any regrets? Willa asked, a question she had never quite dared to ask before. Anything you wish had been different? Colton was quiet for a long moment, actually considering the question. Then he shook his head slowly. Not about us, not about the life we built. The only thing I regret is that Victor hurt you, that you had to go through that pain before you found your way here. I wish I could have protected you from that. But everything else, all the struggles and challenges and hard times we went through together, I don't regret any of it. It made us who we are. No regrets, Willa agreed, feeling peace settle over her like a warm blanket. Just gratitude for every moment, good and bad, that brought us to right here, right now. When they finally went to bed that night, they lay in each other's arms the way they had done for 50 years, and Willa felt the steady beating of Colton's heart beneath her palm. This heart that had been faithful to her for half a century, that had loved her through joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle, youth and old age. I love you, Willa Irwin, Colton whispered into the darkness. More than my first breath, more than my last will be. You are my heart, my home, my everything. And you are mine, Willa whispered back. Today, tomorrow, and forever. Colton passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1935 at the age of 77, with Willa holding his hand and their children gathered around his bed. His last words were her name, spoken with such love and tenderness that everyone in the room wept. Willa lived on for 3 more years, surrounded by family and loved ones, still sharp and engaged until the very end. She spent her days sitting on the porch Colton had built, watching their grandchildren and great-grandchildren play in the yard, telling them stories about the old days, about how their grandfather had saved her, and how she had fallen in love with him a little more every day. When she finally joined Colton in 1938, passing gently in her sleep at the age of 78, they buried her beside him in the family cemetery on the eastern edge of the ranch property, under a cottonwood tree they had planted together 40 years before. The headstone was simple, carved with both their names and the dates of their lives, but at the bottom was an inscription that William had chosen. Forever was not long enough. The ranch continued on, passed down through William's line, and then to his children and grandchildren, the Irwin name becoming synonymous with quality cattle and quarter horses throughout Oklahoma. And every generation that grew up on that land heard the story of how it all started, with a brave young woman stepping off a stagecoach with a black eye and a hopeful heart, and a good man who looked at her and saw not damage or trouble but possibility and strength. They heard about how Colton had asked, "Did he follow you here?" with protective fury in his voice, and how Willa had answered honestly because she instinctively knew she could trust him. They heard about the hasty marriage that became a grand love story, about two people who saved each other and built a legacy that would endure for generations. And in the retelling, the story became more than just history. It became a lesson about courage and kindness, about how love could heal even the deepest wounds, about how home was not a place, but a person who made you feel safe and valued and cherished. It became a reminder that sometimes the best things in life came from the most difficult circumstances, and that taking a chance on hope, even when you were scared, could lead to extraordinary happiness. The house still stands on Irwin land, renovated and updated through the years, but maintaining the bones that Colton built with his own hands. And on warm summer evenings, if you sit on that porch and listen carefully, you can almost hear the echo of their voices, Colton and Willa, talking and laughing together as the sun sets over the Oklahoma prairie they loved so well. You can almost feel the presence of their love, still vibrant and alive even after all these years, a testament to the power of two hearts joined in genuine partnership and devotion. Their story became legend in Oklahoma, told and retold until it took on the quality of myth, though every word of it was true. It was a reminder that real love, the kind that lasted a lifetime and beyond, was built on respect and trust and daily choice, on showing up for each other through good times and bad, on being willing to fight for what mattered and gentle with what was fragile. And it all started with a young woman brave enough to flee her abuser and answer an advertisement for a mail-order bride, and a cowboy decent enough to look at her bruised face and immediately ask if she was in danger, to offer protection before anything else, to see her worth when she struggled to see it herself. In the end, that was the real magic of Colton and Willa's love story. Not that it was perfect or easy, but that it was real. Built on honesty and hard work and genuine affection, growing stronger with each passing year, weathering every storm and celebrating every triumph together as true partners. They proved that love could be healing, that choosing each other every day could build something that would outlast even death itself. And so their legacy lived on, not just in the successful ranch they built, or the children they raised, or the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who bore their features and their names. Their legacy lived in the lesson they taught through the way they lived, that everyone deserves to be loved gently, that courage can change your life, that home is wherever you feel safe and cherished, and that true love, the kind worth having, will always be worth the risk of reaching for it. The mail-order bride with the black eye became a beloved matriarch, respected throughout Oklahoma for her business acumen and her advocacy for women's rights. The cowboy who offered her protection became known for his integrity and kindness, a man who treated everyone with respect regardless of their station in life. But more than any of their individual accomplishments, they were remembered for how they loved each other, faithfully and devotedly, through 50 years of marriage and beyond. Their story was one of redemption and hope, of finding light in darkness and building joy from pain. It was proof that the worst experiences of your past didn't have to define your future, that you could choose differently, be treated better, create a life worth living even after trauma and fear. And it all came down to one moment, one crucial question asked with genuine concern. Did he follow you here? Those 5 words changed everything, revealed Colton's character in an instant, and gave Willa the courage to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had finally found a safe harbor after so long in the storm. From that moment forward, they built a love story for the ages, one that would be told and cherished for generations to come, inspiring others to believe in the possibility of second chances and the transformative power of genuine love. Willa Summers came to Oklahoma City running from violence and fear, and she found in Colton Irwin a partner, a protector, and the great love of her life. Together, they proved that sometimes the best endings come from the most difficult beginnings, and that courage and kindness could create miracles when combined with love. Their story lived on in every sunset viewed from that porch, in every child born on Irwin land, in every act of kindness and courage inspired by their example. And though they were gone, their love remained, as eternal and enduring as the Oklahoma prairie itself, a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever needed to believe that better days were possible, that love could heal, and that home was not just a place, but a feeling of safety and belonging found in the arms of someone who truly saw you and loved you anyway. In the end, that was the greatest gift Colton and Willa gave each other and everyone who knew them. The knowledge that love, real love, was worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, and could transform even the most broken heart into something whole and beautiful again.